I was standing on my front porch with a coffee cup in hand when a sudden scream tore through the quiet Sunday morning air. "He stole my car, my Lamborghini. Someone call the police." The voice came from across the street. Diane Pemberton, the 55-year-old HOA president. And in an instant, she was dialing 911, pacing back and forth on her stone walkway like a wounded animal. Her hair was still wrapped in green foam rollers, bouncing one by one as she pointed her finger toward my garage, as if accusing me of some horrific crime. The white ceramic mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the pavement, coffee spreading out like a fake blood stain. I am Jonathan Blake, 44 years old. That sapphire blue Lamborghini Huracan inside my garage, I bought it in June for $348,000 cash, full paperwork, legally registered. And I knew, sooner or later, this would happen. The morning had started like any other Sunday in Meadow Lake Estates, a gated community on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. 8:30 a.m., the sun already climbing, heat beginning to press down on the neatly trimmed lawns and Spanish tile roofs. I had retired early from software engineering 3 years ago after a series of successful investments in crypto and startups. Nothing flashy, just smart timing and a lot of late nights reading white papers. I bought the house here in February, paid cash. No HOA approval needed because the property deed predated their covenant by 6 months. That detail would matter later. If you are watching this unfold from your own neighborhood, drop a comment below. I would love to know how your HOA compares to mine. 2 police cruisers arrived 12 minutes later, which was fast for a Sunday morning. Officer Martinez stepped out first, a stocky man in his 40s with a buzz cut and the tired eyes of someone who had seen this kind of call before. Officer Campbell followed, younger, sharper, notebook already in hand. Diane rushed toward them, rollers still bobbing, bathrobe flapping open to reveal pajamas underneath. "Thank God you're here. He has my car. It's in his garage right now. I reported it missing 2 days ago." She pointed at me like I was holding a smoking gun, her voice cracking with theatrical urgency. Officer Martinez held up one hand, calm and professional. "Ma'am, slow down. You're saying your Lamborghini was stolen and it's currently in Mr. Blake's garage." Diane nodded frantically. "Yes, I know my car when I see it. I saw it last week when his garage door was open. He was cleaning it." Officer Campbell glanced at me, then back at Diane. "Ma'am, do you have the VIN number, registration, proof of ownership?" Diane's face flushed. "I left it at home, but I'm certain that's my car." Officer Martinez turned to me, his expression neutral but assessing. "Mr. Blake, do you own a Lamborghini Huracan?" I nodded. "I do. Bought it in June from a dealership in Newport Beach, California. Registered it with Texas DMV on June 18th. I have all the documentation inside if you need to see it." My voice was calm, almost bored, the tone of someone who had been expecting this conversation for months. Officer Campbell stepped closer. "Mind if we take a look at the vehicle?" I pulled the garage door remote from my pocket and pressed the button. The door rolled up slowly, sunlight flooding into the space. And there it was, the Lamborghini Huracan, sapphire blue, gleaming under the overhead LED strips I had installed in August. The car sat perfectly centered on the epoxy-coated floor. Not a scratch, not a speck of dust, looking exactly like it had for the past 48 hours because it had not moved. 2 security cameras mounted in the upper corners of the garage were aimed directly at the vehicle, red recording lights blinking steadily. I had installed those cameras in early August after receiving the first warning letter from the HOA about parking violations, which was rich considering my car never left the garage. Officer Martinez walked up to the Lamborghini, checked the VIN plate on the dashboard, then glanced back at Diane. "Ma'am, this VIN is ZHWUC4ZF0PLA12345. Do you have documentation showing this matches your vehicle?" Diane opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I'll bring the papers from home. I know that's my car." Officer Campbell raised an eyebrow. "You saw it when his garage door was open?" Diane hesitated. "Well, yes, but that doesn't mean it's not mine." Officer Martinez turned to me. "Mr. Blake, can you provide proof of ownership right now?" I nodded. "Give me 2 minutes." I walked inside, grabbed the fire-safe box from my office closet, and returned with the certificate of origin, the DMV registration showing my name and address, and the bank transfer receipt showing $348,000 wired to Lamborghini Newport Beach on June 10th. I handed them to Officer Martinez. He scanned them, compared the VN, then handed them to Officer Campbell, who took photos with his phone. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. Officer Martinez looked at Diane. "Ma'am, according to these documents, this vehicle is legally owned and registered to Mr. Blake. If you reported this car stolen 2 days ago, we're going to need you to come down to the station and provide your documentation. If you can't prove ownership, filing a false police report is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas." Her face drained of color, all the theatrical rage evaporating in an instant.
I must have been mistaken. I thought, maybe. I don't know."
Her voice trailed off, and for the first time since she started screaming, she looked at me directly. I met her eyes and kept my expression neutral. Officer Campbell closed his notebook. "Mr. Blake, sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. We'll be in touch. If you do have documentation, bring it to the station before 5 p.m. tomorrow." The officers walked back to their cruisers, and Diane stood frozen on the sidewalk, bathrobe hanging limp, rollers slightly askew. She did not apologize. She did not say a word. She just turned and walked back to her house, the broken coffee mug still lying in pieces on the pavement. I pressed the button on the remote, and the garage door rolled back down, cutting off the sunlight, sealing the Lamborghini back into its climate-controlled vault. I looked at the security cameras, their red lights still blinking, and thought about the email I had received from Diane 3 months ago, the one where she demanded I disclose my income sources because a car like mine did not fit the community image. I thought about the HOA meeting in August where she tried to pass a rule limiting vehicle values to $200,000, a motion that failed 7-4. I thought about the voicemail she left last week, her voice tight with barely concealed anger, saying she would find a way to restore order to Meadow Lake. I took a sip of cold coffee and walked back inside. This was not over. Diane Pemberton did not just want my car. She wanted me gone. And now, she had just handed me the evidence I needed to make sure that when this ended, it would not be me packing boxes. I looked at my watch. 9:15 a.m., September 15th, 2024. The storm was not coming anymore. It was already here. 3 months earlier, June 10th, 2024. I had wired the money to Lamborghini Newport Beach and driven the Huracan home along Interstate 10 with the windows down and the engine purring like a mechanical god. The car was not an impulse buy. I had been watching the market for 2 years, waiting for the right model, the right price, the right moment when my portfolio hit the number I had set for myself back when I was still writing code in a cramped San Francisco apartment. It was the same sapphire Huracan that would later start all the trouble, but in June, when I pulled into my driveway for the first time, I had no idea what Diane Pemberton was already planning. The trouble started in July. I was watering the front lawn one evening when Diane walked over, her smile tight and professional, the kind of smile people use when they are about to ask you to do something you will not want to do. "Jonathan," she said, her voice sweet as antifreeze, "the board has been discussing community standards. Some residents are concerned that certain purchases might create unrealistic expectations, and we feel it would be helpful if you could provide some context about your financial situation." The phrasing was careful, clinical, designed to sound reasonable while backing me into a corner. I turned off the hose and looked at her. "You want me to justify buying my own car?" She tilted her head, still smiling. "It's about maintaining the image of Meadow Lake. Cooperation makes life easier for everyone." I told her no. Politely, but firmly. I explained that my finances were none of the HOA's business, that my property deed predated the covenant, and that I had zero obligation to explain my purchases to anyone. Her smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "I hope you understand that non-cooperation has consequences." And then she walked away, heels clicking on the pavement like a metronome counting down to something I could not yet see. That night, I received the first email. Subject line, Community Standards Compliance, demanding I provide proof of income and justify the purchase of a vehicle inconsistent with neighborhood norms. It was the first shot across the bow. August brought the next escalation. Diane called an emergency HOA meeting on the 15th, a Thursday evening at 7 p.m., held in the community center with its fluorescent lights and folding chairs that smelled like old coffee. 32 residents showed up, most of them curious, a few visibly uncomfortable. Diane stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation, complete with stock photos of luxury cars and a pie chart showing average home values in Meadow Lake. "I propose," she announced, her voice echoing off the cinderblock walls, "that we establish a new covenant restricting vehicle values to a maximum of $200,000. This will preserve our community's character and prevent financial intimidation." The room erupted. Maggie Sullivan, my neighbor 2 houses down, a third-grade teacher with a dry sense of humor and a low tolerance for nonsense, stood up immediately. "Diane, this is targeting one person. You know that, right?" The tension was thick enough to cut. Another resident muttered something about government overreach, and someone else shook their head in disgust. The vote came down to 4 in favor, 7 against, the motion dead on arrival. Diane's face went red, then pale, and she adjourned the meeting without another word. I left feeling like I had won something, but the victory tasted hollow because I knew she was not done. The real reveal came 2 days later, on August 17th, when Maggie knocked on my door holding a manila folder. "You need to see this," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She spread 3 pages across my kitchen table, printed emails she had accidentally been copied on during a board discussion. The first was from Diane to a real estate attorney named Howard Glass, asking about legal methods to encourage non-compliant residents to relocate. The second was a forwarded message from her son, Trevor Pemberton, who ran a development company called Pemberton Properties, outlining a plan to purchase 3 adjacent lots in Meadow Lake and build high-end spec homes starting at $800,000. The third was the kicker, an email from Diane to Trevor dated July 20th. "Blake is the problem. If we can make him uncomfortable enough, he'll sell, and we can acquire his property at a discount before the rezoning announcement." I read the emails twice, and something inside me shifted. This was not about community standards or neighborhood aesthetics. This was about greed, plain and simple, wrapped in the language of governance. Diane was using her position to manipulate residents, intimidate dissenters, and pave the way for her son's real estate scheme. I felt the irritation I had been carrying since July harden into something colder, sharper, more deliberate. I looked at Maggie. "She's trying to push me out so her son can flip properties." Maggie nodded. "And she's using HOA authority to do it. That's why she wanted your finances. She was building a case to paint you as a disruptive influence." I thanked her, made copies of everything, and knew exactly what I needed to do next. On August 20th, I installed 2 security cameras in my garage, wide-angle units with cloud storage and motion detection, aimed directly at the Lamborghini. If Diane was willing to manipulate HOA rules and coordinate with her son to force me out, I needed to document everything. The cameras went live that afternoon, recording 24 hours a day, capturing every angle of that sapphire blue car sitting perfectly still in its climate-controlled vault. On September 12th, 3 days before the police showed up, Diane left a voicemail on my phone. Her voice was clipped, angry, no longer pretending to be friendly. "Mr. Blake, this is your final warning. The board has documented multiple violations of community standards, and if you do not comply within 72 hours, we will pursue legal action to enforce our covenants." I saved the voicemail and waited, because by then, I knew exactly what she was capable of, and I knew that sooner or later. She would cross a line she could not uncross. I sat in my office that Sunday afternoon, September 15th, after the police had left and Diane had retreated to her house. Every piece of evidence was already organized, backed up, indexed, a digital arsenal waiting to be deployed, the security footage, the emails from Maggie, the voicemail, the HOA meeting minutes, all of it carefully cataloged in a folder I had named Pemberton versus Blake. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Diane Pemberton had spent 3 months trying to make me disappear, but by calling the police and making that false accusation in front of witnesses, she had just armed me with everything I needed to dismantle her authority, expose her scheme, and make sure she was the one who disappeared instead. The storm was here, and I was ready for war. Monday morning, September 16th, I found the envelope taped to my front door at dawn. Official HOA letterhead stamped and dated like a legal summons. Inside was a notice of violation claiming my Lamborghini had been parked in violation of community aesthetic standards, assessing a fine of $500 payable within 10 business days. I stood on my porch in bare feet, coffee still brewing inside, and felt the absurdity of it wash over me. The car had not left my garage in 48 hours. The police had confirmed my ownership less than 24 hours ago, and now Diane was doubling down, as if reality had become optional. I called Charles Winters at 9 a.m. sharp. Charles was a real estate attorney I had worked with during my home purchase, a man in his early 50s with 2 decades of experience fighting HOA overreach and a reputation for being polite, thorough, and absolutely merciless in depositions. I walked him through everything: the false police report, the emails Maggie had provided, the HOA meeting in August, and now this latest violation notice. Charles was quiet for a moment. Then I heard him typing. "This is textbook abuse of authority," he said, his voice steady and precise. "She's using her position to harass you, and the false police report gives us serious leverage. I'll draft a cease and desist letter today. Send it certified to Diane and the full board. If she continues after that, we go to civil court and she loses everything." There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. He had seen this pattern before, and he knew exactly how it would end. The letter went out that afternoon. 3 pages of legal language that boiled down to a simple message: stop now, or face consequences. Charles included the police report, the email trail from Maggie, and citations from Texas Property Code prohibiting discriminatory enforcement. He sent copies to every board member, ensuring Diane's colleagues would know exactly what she had been doing behind their backs. "This is going to make her very uncomfortable," Charles said when he called to confirm delivery. "Good," I replied. For the first time in months, I felt the weight shift. I was no longer defending. I was advancing. Wednesday, September 18th. Diane responded with another notice, this one claiming I had failed to maintain appropriate landscaping standards and assessing a fine of $1,200. The citation referenced weeds in my front flower bed, which was absurd because I had hired a landscaping service in August specifically to avoid giving her ammunition. I took one photo, sent it to Charles with a single sentence: "She's spiraling." His reply came back in under 5 minutes. "Perfect. Every action she takes now is more evidence of retaliation. Let her keep going." I could hear the satisfaction in his tone even through text. Diane was not fighting me anymore. She was fighting herself. Friday, September 20th. Diane called an emergency HOA board meeting with less than 24 hours notice, violating the bylaws that required 72 hours for non-emergency sessions. The agenda listed a single item: motion to suspend garage privileges for non-compliant residents. I knew exactly who she meant. Charles advised me to attend but say nothing. "Let her talk," he said. "Let her dig the hole deeper. You don't need to defend yourself. The evidence does that for you." So I went, and I watched. Saturday, September 21st, 7 p.m. I walked into the community center to find the room packed with 46 residents, more than I had ever seen at an HOA meeting. Word had spread. People knew something was happening, and they wanted to see it unfold. Diane stood at the front, visibly tense, her hands gripping the edges of the podium like she was holding onto a life raft. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began, her voice tight and brittle. "We're here to address a serious matter of community compliance. Mr. Blake has repeatedly violated HOA standards and created a disruptive environment that threatens the harmony of Meadow Lake Estates. I am proposing that we suspend his garage privileges pending full compliance." Maggie Sullivan stood up before Diane finished her sentence. "Diane, you called the police on Sunday and accused Jonathan of stealing his own car. The police confirmed he owns it. What compliance are you talking about?" The room went silent. Diane's face flushed, her composure cracking in real time. "That was a misunderstanding. I believed there was a legitimate concern." Maggie did not sit down. "You told me 2 weeks ago that you wanted to teach him a lesson. Those were your exact words." The air in the room shifted, tension coiling tighter. Another resident, Greg, raised his hand. "Diane, I've been on this board for 4 years. I've never seen you go after anyone like this. What's really going on?" Diane tried to redirect, but her voice cracked. "This is not about personal grievances. This is about maintaining standards. But no one was buying it anymore. Frank, the man with the vintage Mustang, stood up. I move that we table this motion indefinitely, and I move that we schedule a vote to remove Diane Pemberton from the board for abuse of authority. 3 people seconded the motion immediately. The vote was called. 8 in favor of removing her. 3 abstaining. 0 opposed. Diane looked around, searching for support, but found none. She gathered her papers, hands shaking, and walked out of the community center without another word. The room buzzed with whispered conversations, some sympathetic, most relieved. I stayed in my seat, saying nothing, watching the door swing shut behind her. For the first time in months, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph exactly, but relief. She could not touch me anymore. Not here, not like this. But as I walked home under the Texas night sky, the air still warm and heavy, I knew this was not over. Diane might be off the board, but the false police report was still on record, and I was not about to let that slide. Justice was not just about winning. It was about making sure the people who abused power faced real consequences. The storm had shifted, and now I was the one bringing it. Tuesday, September 25th. Charles Winters called me at 10 a.m. with news that changed everything. "Jonathan," he said, his voice carrying that precise, measured tone he used when delivering information he knew would land hard. "I just got off the phone with the Travis County District Attorney's Office. They've agreed to review Diane's false police report for potential criminal charges. Texas Penal Code Section 37.08, filing a false report to a peace officer. Class B misdemeanor. If they decide to prosecute, she's looking at up to 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine." I sat down at my kitchen table, the morning light slanting through the windows, and let that sink in. Diane had tried to weaponize the police against me, and now the system was about to weaponize itself against her. Charles continued, "I also filed a civil lawsuit this morning. We're suing Diane Pemberton personally and the HOA board collectively for harassment, defamation, and abuse of authority. We're seeking $87,500 in damages, covering emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages to send a message. The complaint includes every email, every violation notice, every piece of evidence we've collected since July. I've also subpoenaed the HOA's financial records to investigate whether Diane misused community funds for personal legal expenses." I could hear him flipping through pages on the other end. "The hearing is set for October 10th. We're going to lay everything out in open court, and Diane is going to have to answer for all of it." I spent the rest of the week preparing. Charles requested copies of my security camera footage, so I pulled 48 hours of video from September 13th to September 15th. The entire window surrounding Diane's false report. A single frame at 9:12 a.m. on September 15th shows Diane on the phone while my garage door is closed, the Lamborghini motionless inside. These items, along with every email, violation notice, and voicemail, were organized chronologically and sent to counsel. Charles reviewed everything and nodded. "This is airtight," he said. "She has no defense. The only question is how badly she wants to fight this before she realizes she's already lost." On September 27th, Diane hired a lawyer. His name was Gerald Hopkins, a 58-year-old attorney who specialized in defending HOAs against resident lawsuits, which meant he was used to fighting people like me. Charles met him for a pre-trial conference on September 30th, and when Charles called me afterward, I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Hopkins tried to negotiate," Charles said. "He offered to drop all HOA violations and pay your legal fees if you agreed to drop the civil suit. I told him no. He asked what it would take to settle. I told him a public apology, full reimbursement of legal costs, and Diane's resignation from any HOA position in Texas for 5 years. He said he'd talk to his client." October 5th, 5 days before the hearing. Maggie knocked on my door holding another manila folder. "You're going to want to see this," she said, and I knew from her expression it was bad news for Diane. Inside the folder were printed bank statements from the HOA's operating account, statements Maggie had obtained through a records request after Diane's removal from the board. The documents showed 3 withdrawals over the past 4 months, totaling $18,500, all marked as legal consulting fees, but with no corresponding invoices or vendor documentation. The 3 withdrawals, totaling $18,500 with no invoices, converted a harassment case into an embezzlement claim. Maggie pointed to the dates: July 15th, August 10th, September 5th, all of them right after she escalated things with you. I think she was using HOA money to pay her personal lawyer. I handed the statements to Charles the next morning. He read them twice, then looked up at me with something close to disbelief. "This is embezzlement," he said flatly. "She didn't just abuse her authority. She stole from the community to fund her harassment campaign. I'm amending the complaint to include misappropriation of funds. The DA is going to love this." He made a note on his legal pad. "Hopkins is going to have a very hard time defending this. If Diane has any sense left, she'll settle before we get to court. If not, we're going to bury her." October 9th, the day before the hearing, Gerald Hopkins called Charles and asked for one last meeting. They met at a coffee shop downtown, and Charles recorded the conversation with Hopkins's permission. Hopkins offered a full settlement written apology, $12,000 reimbursement, permanent HOA resignation, and a 5-year ban from any HOA position in Texas in exchange for dropping both the civil suit and criminal complaint. Charles called me from the parking lot. "What do you think?" he asked. I thought about Diane's face when the police asked why my car was in my garage, the theatrical rage in her voice, the months of harassment, the violation notices, the emails, the meetings, all of it orchestrated to push me out so her son could profit. I refused because accepting would bury the truth and let Diane escape public accountability. The community deserved to know what she had done. I told Charles no. "She filed a false police report," I said. "She stole from the HOA. She tried to destroy my reputation because I wouldn't bend to her authority. A written apology and some money doesn't fix that. I want her in court. I want everything on the record. I want people to know what she did." Charles was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Understood. I'll tell Hopkins we're going to trial." That night, I pulled up the security camera footage one more time, watching the timestamp tick forward while the Lamborghini sat perfectly still in the frame. 48 hours. Not a single movement. Irrefutable evidence that Diane had lied to the police, lied to the community, and lied to herself about what she could get away with. The hearing was set for 10 a.m., October 10th, at Travis County Courthouse. I laid out my clothes for the next day, checked my phone for Charles's final instructions, and sat on my back porch watching the sun go down over Meadow Lake Estates. Diane was 2 houses away, probably doing the same thing, probably realizing that tomorrow everything she had built, every ounce of authority she had wielded, was going to collapse in front of witnesses. I felt a small, cold clarity settle over me. Not satisfaction exactly, but the calm that comes from knowing you have done everything right and the outcome is no longer in doubt. The storm was not coming anymore. It was here. And tomorrow, everyone would see exactly what happened when someone mistook power for immunity. Justice was not just about being right. It was about making sure the truth could not be buried. And I was about to make sure it never would be. October 10th, 10 a.m., Travis County Courthouse. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, fluorescent lights humming overhead, rows of benches half filled with residents from Meadow Lake Estates who had come to watch. Maggie sat in the front row, arms crossed. Frank was 2 seats down, still wearing his vintage Mustang ball cap. Diane sat at the defense table with Gerald Hopkins, her posture rigid, hands folded in her lap like she was trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. She did not look at me when I walked in. Judge Eleanor Carter entered at 10:05 a.m., a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and the kind of sharp, assessing gaze that told you she had seen every trick in the book. "This is a civil hearing for Blake versus Pemberton," she said, settling into her seat. "Mr. Winters, you may present your case." Charles stood and began. He walked the judge through the timeline, starting with Diane's demand for financial disclosure in July, the failed HOA vote in August, the violation notices in September, and the false police report on September 15th. He submitted the security camera footage, playing the time-stamped video on a monitor facing the bench. The judge watched in silence as 48 hours of footage showed the Lamborghini sitting motionless in my garage, the door never opening, the car never moving. Charles then introduced the emails Maggie had provided, the correspondence between Diane and her son Trevor outlining their plan to push me out and acquire my property at a discount. He read one line aloud, "Blake is the problem. If we can make him uncomfortable enough, he'll sell." The judge's pen moved across her notepad. Charles followed with the HOA financial records, the 3 withdrawals totaling $18,500 with no invoices, no board approval. "Your Honor," Charles said, his voice steady, "this is systematic abuse of authority, funded by community money, intended to benefit Ms. Pemberton's family financially." Gerald Hopkins stood to respond, but Judge Carter interrupted him partway through. "Mr. Hopkins, your client called the police and accused Mr. Blake of stealing a car she admitted she saw in his garage. How is that good faith?" Hopkins hesitated. "Your Honor, Ms. Pemberton believed there was a legitimate concern about the vehicle's provenance." The judge looked at him over her reading glasses. She had no documentation, no VIN, no proof of ownership. She saw the car in his garage and called it stolen. That is filing a false report. Judge Carter turned to Diane. "Ms. Pemberton, do you have anything to say?" Diane stood slowly, her voice barely audible. "I thought I was protecting the community. I believed he was. I don't know." Her voice cracked, and she sat back down. The judge waited, but Diane said nothing else. Judge Carter flipped through the file in front of her, then looked up. "I am ruling in favor of Mr. Blake. Ms. Pemberton, you are ordered to pay $87,500 in damages. You are permanently barred from holding any HOA position in the state of Texas for 5 years. Additionally, I am referring this case to the Travis County District Attorney for criminal prosecution under Texas Penal Code Section 37.08 and for potential charges related to misappropriation of funds." The room was silent. Diane's face drained of color, and her hands gripped the edge of the table. Judge Carter continued. "This court takes abuse of community authority very seriously. You used your position to harass a resident, filed a false police report, and misused community funds for personal benefit. These actions have consequences." She struck her gavel once. "This hearing is adjourned." I walked out of the courthouse into the bright October sunlight, the air crisp and cool, and felt the weight I had been carrying since June finally lift. Maggie caught up with me on the steps. "You did it," she said quietly. I nodded. "The truth did it. I just made sure people couldn't ignore it." Behind us, Diane walked out with Hopkins, her head down, avoiding the eyes of the residents gathered outside. She got into a car and left without a word. The storm was over, and justice, cold and precise, had done exactly what it was supposed to do. November 20th, 40 days after the hearing, I received a certified letter from the Travis County District Attorney's Office. Diane Pemberton had been formally charged with filing a false report to a peace officer under Texas Penal Code Section 37.08 and misappropriation of HOA funds under Section 37.10, tampering with governmental records. The DA's letter outlined the plea agreement Diane had accepted to avoid trial, 18 months probation, 240 hours of community service, full restitution of $18,500 to the Meadow Lake HOA, and $12,000 in additional fines. The agreement also included a permanent ban from serving on any homeowners association board in Texas. I read the letter twice, folded it, and filed it in the same box with everything else. The $87,500 in civil damages arrived by bank transfer on November 22nd. I used $12,000 to reimburse Charles Winters for his legal fees, donated $5,000 to a legal aid organization that helps residents fight HOA abuse, and put the rest into an investment account. The money was not the point. It never had been. The point was making sure Diane could not do this to anyone else, making sure the next person she targeted would not have to fight alone, and making sure the community understood that authority without accountability is just another word for tyranny. Meadow Lake Estates held elections for a new HOA board in early December. Maggie Sullivan ran for president and won by a landslide, 38 votes out of 42 participating households. Her first act was to commission an independent audit of the HOA's finances. which confirmed what we already knew. Diane had misused $18,500 over 4 months, funneling community funds into personal legal expenses with no oversight, no invoices, and no board approval. The audit report was distributed to every household in Meadow Lake, and the new board implemented financial transparency rules requiring quarterly public reports and dual signature approval for any expense over $500. On December 15th, I was in my garage detailing the Lamborghini when Maggie stopped by. "Thought you'd want to know," she said, leaning against the door frame. "Diane moved out last week. Sold the house. Left town. I heard she's living with her sister in Dallas." I nodded, wiping down the sapphire blue hood with a microfiber cloth. "Good," I said, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because her absence meant the community could finally move forward without the shadow of her manipulation hanging over every decision. Maggie smiled. "You know, a lot of people are grateful for what you did. Standing up to her, not backing down." I shrugged. I just made sure the truth came out. The system did the rest. I walked back into my house that evening, poured a glass of bourbon, and stood on the back porch watching the lights of Meadow Lake flicker on one by one as the sun set. The Lamborghini sat in the garage behind me, doors closed, engine silent, exactly where it belonged. The storm that had started in June was over. Diane was gone. The HOA had new leadership, and I had learned something I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Justice is not about revenge. It is not about winning, and it is not about proving you are right. Justice is about making sure the truth cannot be buried, making sure power has consequences, and making sure the next person who gets targeted has a roadmap to follow. If you believe in standing up to abuse of power, in fighting for accountability, and in making sure people like Diane face real consequences, support Karma Clause. Because sometimes, karma needs a little help, and when it does, we make sure it lands exactly where it should.